This might be a little inflammatory, but you can't have affordability in a rent-based economy. We have a rent-based economy, that number is always going up.
What if we imagine a world without landlords and tenants? And that it's not rhetorical because you actually built it. So tell us about how you convinced the city of Chicago to pass an ordinance allowing you to complete that project.
Well, a couple of clarifications. It wasn't an ordinance, it was a loan they gave us, but I'll get into the whole shebang because there was a lot of stuff going on there.
Today's guests are Carlos, Rafael, and Karla Robles, the siblings behind Duo Development, a Chicago innovation studio redefining real estate through community ownership, equitable design, and systems-level change.
Just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you're all of a sudden exempt of evil.
We're working with 12 other projects currently that are being led by 17 people total.
If someone is listening to this and they are a founder or an architect and they're inspired by what you are doing, what's the one mindset shift you'd recommend for them to start building something differently?
That's a good one. I think, honestly,
Welcome to the Purpose Profit Shift, where real stories about bold shifts illuminate how we can create a new economy. I'm your host, Rachel Bernier-Green, social entrepreneur, activist, and founder of EJ Consortium, a finance consulting firm designed to help purposeful businesses change the world. Today's conversation features 3 members of the family behind Duo Development, an innovation studio in Chicago that's proving you don't have to choose between community impact and sustainable business models. Brothers Carlos and Rafael Robles co-founded Duo in 2019 after watching how traditional real estate either reinforced inequity or completely burned out mission-driven founders. Together with their sister Karla Robles, they've pioneered what they call multi-contextual design, a framework that considers economics, ecology, technology, culture, and ethics in every project. The result? They're acquiring buildings developed into 100% affordable housing units, launching community hubs that challenge what neighborhood spaces can be. They've trained over 150 residents in development skills and have secured city partnerships that eliminate traditional landlord-tenant models. So today will be a conversation about what happens when a family decides to practice what they call norm form making, reshaping both the systems and spaces that make up our cities. Robles family, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you for having us.
Yes, I am so excited for this conversation today, especially with you all being a family operated and led business. And I've worked with my siblings a lot too. So I love when I see other people who are doing that and it's going well. To start off today, let's start by thinking about how 3 family members ended up co-founding an innovation studio together. So Carlos, I know you were teaching at CPS, then you were researching at University of Michigan, and then consulting. Rafael and Karla, what were your paths that led you to Duo? And and this question is for all of you, when did you realize you wanted to work together on this?
Karla, you can start.
Well, do you want to start because you guys started Duo and then I joined, so I can.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I think part of the story of Duo is also in terms of background, all of our professional backgrounds and personal backgrounds kind of interweave, and then they all seem kind of disparate parts of the same theme. So my particular background from the 3 of us is in architecture, design, kind of like architecture, design, arts space, cultural space. And I studied architecture at UIC and then was able to work for an architecture firm called Studio Gang Architects in the city of Chicago. Very quickly, I realized there that I wanted to learn more about the business side, the client side, like who were these clients making requests. And so that led me to start working in real estate development, but then seeing sort of development as such a financial driven industry, I wanted to get back into the design world, but I did it this time as part of an innovation studio called Doblin, also in Chicago. And that was all before founding Duo. So all of those kind of like pieces of the architecture, the real estate development, the innovation sort of combined with Carlos's experience is what led to starting a practice like Duo at the beginning, at least.
Yeah, and for myself, I'm the youngest of the 3, and I actually also started out in education. So For all of us, our background being immigrants, we immigrated here from Mexico in 2004, and we were undocumented. Now I have DACA. They recently got their visas, but that experience of being undocumented definitely shaped what fields we wanted to go into, and our approach to being a part of different systems. So I wanted to start out as a high school teacher, and eventually, I thought my path would go down that line, maybe going to counseling and administration or education policy. So I, throughout college, was kind of exploring both realms. I started education, but then I also interned in Washington, D.C., trying to also explore the policy side of things. And I was a teacher for about 3 years, and then eventually wanted to transition out of that world and went into more human-centered design, kind of taking in the classroom, we curated the experiences for the students, making sure that their needs were met through different lesson plans and what we were learning. And then I transitioned that into going into human-centered design, also at Dublin. So this is where our sibling paths started to collide. We all worked at Deloitte. So I was in the same branch that Rafa was in, with Dublin being a research lead. And then shortly after that, after about 2 years, I joined Duo full-time as well, and now also focus a little bit more on the research side. So also design research and experiences. So curating some of for example, the building you were talking about with Starling, leading the experience design, working with the operations there. And it's been going really well so far. People always ask us, they're like, do you really get along? And we said, yeah, yes, we do. We're all, working with the same values and working to go in the same direction with our work. So it's been really great to come together.
That's awesome. And I just want to go back and take a moment and just say congratulations on going from, being undocumented in that journey. I know that it is not easy by any means. And just want to shout
Thank you.
guys
Yeah.
out for,
Yeah.
that progress. That's awesome. So now I want to get into this framework that you guys have developed. And I love that you each shared a bit of your backgrounds, because that really illustrates why this framework is so multidimensional. So can you talk about what it actually looks like to use multi-contextual design in practice, and maybe take us through one project and show how you use that?
Yeah, it's pretty messy. And
I love that.
and,
Yes.
and the framework is pretty clean, but I can kind of set the foundation, and then Carlos and Carla, you can build on. So all in all, part of the reason why we have a framework in the first place is that we felt like we wanted to have a point of view on how to work, not just sort of like what to do. So like if you think about what do, we want to do a lot of things like build buildings or build new business models or new experiences and things like that. But as part of like our training, I guess, very process driven approach, like at places like Dublin, where, you have something like human centered design or design thinking that is kind of like a repeatable approach to innovation. And that brings a level of rigor that is helpful for any project, not just a one off project. And so I think the reason why we have that framework is so that we have this rigorous approach that we can continue to refine as we go. But when we think about the built environment, we usually describe the built environment as a built environment, instead of saying a building or a space or an interior. Partly is because we like this framing of not just sort of like problem solving, like you would traditionally in a business where you say identify your top 5 problems and then solve them. We like to think of this framing of what reality are you creating, because when you are building physical places, you can participate in so many different ways. One is designing the building, but then the other is designing what happens inside the building. The other is invisible. It's like who owns the building or who operates the building, or what emotional impact does it have? How does it connect people to nature or themselves? And all these questions are very chicken and egg. Like who does that for a living? Some architects do it, some architects don't. Some developers do it, some developers don't. And so, this kind of like framing of like what reality are we creating is what the framework really helps us to do. And then, the breakdown of the framework itself is just the tool for thinking more broadly about about what reality are we creating. So then that's where the lenses come in. But Carlos, maybe you can build on the lenses.
Yeah, and so yeah, the realities that we're creating, I think that's a really strong foundation, right, for the world. Because I think like whenever we're doing things that are like pushing back against the status quo or pushing for things that bring about a more just, more creative, beautiful world, there's always the person in the room that's like, well, you gotta like work within reality, and you're like, okay, like, but like that's made up by us, right? So like, why don't we create the realities that we want? So it's like fine, like there are like constraints, right? Like we're not saying that there aren't, but like we can start from such a more broad canvas to imagine the realities that we want to see. So in that journey, right, of like just really like push it, right? Whenever like if you do get somebody across the bridge of you make up the own realities, they're still like heavily like underpinned by the economics, right? It's like, well, what's the economic reality? Oh, is it gonna make money? It's like nobody is telling you to stop eating to come up with something cool, right? So the five lenses are just a way, right? Like it's evolved. Like we used to call them principles, but now we really talked about them as lenses because it's like when you go to the eye doctor, right? You put something on and you see it a certain way. You put another lens on and you see it differently. So the five lenses of economics, ecology, technology, culture, and ethics are all useful because you put them on and you see different things, right? When you create these new realities. If you're only looking at a thing through an economic lens, you're going to create, something probably not that inspiring. With all due respect to the econ people. But then as you put things on, you see different things, and they're also like a little bit like dials or like a DJ table, right? Like you crank some up, you lower some down. It's not really like meant to maximize all of them. Really, kind of like an eye prescription. Everybody has a different one, right? So that is something that we saw was helpful because even in the more exciting projects that we see, like there's always economics, right? Like we always say, like people will walk away immediately from a project that is not economical, but they will not walk away immediately from a project that is unethical, right? Whether it's like built environment or like a product, right? Like it's not just for the buildings. But then in the building world, you start to see a little bit more. There's always economics. You see a little bit more if you get lucky, like technology, right? Like seeing how we can make things, more efficient and whatnot. And then if you get really lucky, you see the ecology, right? Like popping its head, but it's never like a main feature. But there's usually still very, very little consideration to the cultural aspect and the ethical aspects in buildings. And again, like this extends to not just buildings, right? In any way that we solve any challenges that we have or create new reality. So that's a little bit of the five lenses and the way we like to use them. And like Rafa said, it's clear in paper and in speech, but like when we're doing a project, it's like kind of implied a lot of times. Sometimes we do use them explicitly with clients and in our own work, but that's a little bit of the background. Karla, what else would you add to the mix?
Well, I would also say that the lenses have also, like, they're great when we use them to create new realities, but then we also really use them to understand the present state and like the context in which we are working on. Sometimes we work in neighborhoods that we don't immediately live in, so it's really important to understand the context of that specific space and understand the histories of the communities who live there, the land in itself. Why is it that way? Who has come and gone from the specific space? What did it look like before? And how can we honor that into what we're trying to create in this new reality that we're creating? And we use that not just in our projects, but also we're working with 12 other projects currently that are being led by 17 people total, but well, we might get into this later. Did we talk about obras compartidas?
No.
Not yet.
No. All
We
right.
can announce it.
We can announce it. Okay.
Oh, amazing.
Yes, our most exciting, newest adventure has been Obras Compartidas, or shared works in English. And we wanted to, once we were done with Starling, a lot of people were saying, well, what's next? What's next? What are you building next? And we wanted to turn it into who's next and how can we partner with other people who are also looking to build their own buildings, bring their own visions and their own realities to life. And some people are doing it in partnership, some people are doing it by themselves. So that's why there's 17 people, but it's 12 projects throughout Chicago focused on South and West sides. And we are also working with taking a minority stake in those projects and going from beginning to end with all of them. And that's where a lot of the multi-contextual lenses have also come in. And, for some people, it just really is bringing in different things to keep in mind, like something as simple as, what are we going to name this building? Oh, okay, well, for example, one building is going to be in North Lawndale. So the person who we're working with, Brianna, said, well, oh, let's think about the name. How can we keep in mind the communities that are here, right? Which is something that she hadn't really even thought about. So yeah, that's our newest exciting venture, and how multi-contextual keeps being a part of our work.
I love that. Oh, go ahead, Rafa.
No, well, I was going to build a little more, but we can go to another question too.
Oh, this conversation is guided by kind of where the gems are dropping. So I don't have like a script that we need to follow or questions we have to hit. So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to go back to your question of like, how does it feel in real life? Because I think part of it is how we have structured Duo to be able to do that is like an integrated practice. So in-house, our backgrounds are very different professionally. So at Duo, we have the kind of like in-house skills to take a project from beginning of like conceptualize it, do research with a lot of Karla's background, do financial modeling with a lot of Carlos's background, do a lot of the design with my background. And we all end up doing like participating in the process all together, but one person kind of steps up, some back, and sort of needed. And so when we're doing a project, it feels very kind of like sporadic sometimes, where in terms of like how a design meeting actually works, it's not so planned. We might be talking about a business model, and then that leads us to randomly start talking about the design of the building. Like, what would, if a business works that way, then what would the building look like to support that? Or like, what does that mean for the experience? And do people pay tickets, or do they enter free? And so oftentimes I think of it as a new practice that we're practicing, because it is many things. It's like people, like we are doing development, and we are doing architectural design, and we are doing, business design and research and community engagement and like all of these things. So we're going we're not quite going against the grain, like we think all of us people have many different skills and do many different things, but somehow professionally we're so used to picking a lane, and then, there's a lot of buildings that are good buildings that may have brought a lot of people to the table, different professions, to be able to do that. And we just happen to have the skills in house to do a lot of the work. So we kind of keep it small to be able to do that.
And we actually talked about that a bit on the last episode I recorded, where we talked about the kind of beauty of operating in a boutique manner. And that if you are doing that because that's a values aligned decision and you're not just chasing growth at all costs, that there are some things that we're able to kind of protect in our culture and in how we operate because we choose to be a certain size.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about that a lot. I think, Carlos, you probably can speak to that better, but we do think about very intentionally what we like doing. Like we like I personally like designing buildings. So if you described a future, like a reality for us, where we would just be sort of directors of tons of buildings, and we don't really get to be in the weeds or like really think about them too deeply because there's teams doing that. I don't think I would find that so fulfilling. So we also are careful to think about what we want to do day to day and how much we want to prioritize work versus, other things in life. And I think being a small size group makes that more manageable, at least.
Yeah. Definitely. I want to give some context to the listeners to talk about HomeKeep and Starling. So, HomeKeep challenges landlord-tenant paradigms through shared ownership, and Starling opened. Was that last year already?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, last September.
My goodness. I kept thinking that it was last year, and I'm like, it can't be that long. But wow. So the building has already been open for a year, and it opened, and you called it something that stuck with me. I heard one of you call it a space for liberation, that it's not just a cafe, it's not just a co working space, but it's something unprecedented. And that you guys even had to work with the city of Chicago to pass some ordinances to support some of these business models. So let's start with HomeKeep, because I feel like HomeKeep really asks a bold question. What if we imagine a world without landlords and tenants? and that it's not rhetorical because you actually built it. So tell us about the shared ownership structure and how you convinced the city of Chicago to pass an ordinance allowing you to complete that project.
Yeah, so I'm happy to take the lead on that one, and you guys can fill in any gaps. So HomeKeep, a couple of clarifications. It wasn't an ordinance. It was a loan they gave us, but it was I'll get into the whole shebang because definitely there's a lot of stuff going on there. But yeah, HomeKeep is just three scattered site buildings across Hermosa, Albany Park, and Belmont Cregan. Three like very rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods that are historically like working class and affordable and good places to live. So we were reached out by an organization called Communities United about the fact that these buildings were part of a larger portfolio of an affordable housing developer that we're now sort of like at risk of being sold at market rate. And that's, just sort of like that's just the nature of the beast in affordable housing, right? Like you keep it affordable for a lot of years, as many years as we possibly can, which they did. And then, but at some point, the can stops being kicked down the road and the building needs to be sold at market rate. We were offered to see if we could buy all of the 40 units across all of the buildings. We were like, no, but we could probably swing 8 of the units across these 3 buildings. So it's two flats, 1 4 flat. And one thing that we wanted to see is like, we're not just gonna, if we acquire them, we don't want to just like then kick the can down the road of affordability for another 30 years, right? So we started really questioning, okay, how do you get affordability? Like what's going on? And then the long story short is like you can't, and this might be a little inflammatory, but like you can't have affordability in a rent-based economy, right? Like the we have a rent-based economy, that number is always going up, right? And the incentives are completely misaligned to
Absolutely.
create affordability. So the fact that you even have to afford housing, that means you need to earn money to pay for a house that you don't even own, right? So the landlord will forever, even the nicest landlords will forever want to get as much rent as they can, and the tenant will obviously always is told, you gotta stick it out for a couple of years, work hard, save money, buy your own house, right? But that's not the reality for a lot of people.
Right.
So we said, okay, we're gonna buy these things. We're not just gonna be there to be the nice landlord. We actually want to see like how can we actually impact the system within these like 8 units that we have, right? So we the first piece that we had was that it was a really good partnership between the city of Chicago, Community United, and us, and Andy Gear from who was an independent consultant, and IFF, who was the community development financial institution that provided the loan. So the first piece that we wanted was the city was essentially giving us a 0% interest loan where it was payable for in 30 years as a balloon payment for I think it was $125,000 per unit. So and then IFF would give the rest of the loan. So that was like part one of the puzzle to make it really affordable. And then the other piece, like we didn't have like the cash on hand to buy the thing, so we did an equity crowdfunding raise for the down payment, and that I think it was the first one in Chicago. We're like really bad at publishing stuff, but it was the first like equity crowdfunding campaign in Chicago. There's been a couple more since then, and it was like really successful, right? Like for real estate, yeah. And we raised the money, so that was the first piece, right? Like we wanted to have investors that weren't like just profit maximizers to begin with, because
Right.
that's one of the issues of affordable housing, or there's even somebody's always trying to get paid, and it's like there's that
At every level.
yeah, get what you gotta do, what you gotta do, right? But that wasn't gonna be us. So then for the people that we fundraise for, they're still able to get a healthy return given the affordable loan from the city, right? So there was another good piece there. But we were also telling them that it was gonna be more about like this like landlord-tenant model situation, and yeah, so that was sort of like the pieces of the puzzle. The city that was unfortunately the last. It was called the PAIR program for preserving existing affordable rentals, and we were the last one before they sunset the project.
Oh man.
Um, but it's been like a really good example. So we are like considering going back to the city. We have good relationships with Department of Housing and the people that gave us the loan on like ways that they can bring it back, right? Because it's very it's very easy, honestly. Like the hardships kind of happen that city council and like inner city things that they're working to fix. But all in all, that is like a very, very big piece of why we're able to keep the rents affordable, provide a healthy return to the investors, and still, keep them in good shape. So that's because sort of like the setup. And then for the landlord tenant piece, that was something that we initially this was a little different in our how we approach things, right? Because normally in our design projects, we try to start with the user, right? And like who lives there, like, how it's being impacted, but we couldn't really do that during the acquisition of the project because they were fully occupied, which was good. But we couldn't just be like, hey, like I'm gonna be potentially like the new owner, and like like people really like don't love their landlords for good reasons. But so that was something that we were gonna have to kind of figure out after the acquisition, right? It was because we also had the time pressure of them being sold to market rates. So we talked to them a little bit during the inspections of the units, and we obviously had like hope for transferring full ownership to the tenants. But there's one of those pieces that I think some of the lessons learned has been that oppression is internalized by all of us. So some people are tenants are like that doesn't even sound that great to me. Like I just want to keep paying rent. And the piece that we're gonna explore is like just try to make it like as simple as possible, right? Like obviously like we thought about like with tenant, like co-ops, things like that. And like people weren't really like interested in a lot of this, right? Like they're also scatter sites. So it's like two neighbors per building, four in one. So the simplest form was just to count some of their rent as like equity almost, right? So
Okay.
just like $100 or $200 a month. It's almost like a little savings account. And then when and if the buildings ever get sold, like these people would be entitled to a portion of that. There are some models like popping up here and there across the country. They were like rent as equity, things of that nature. So it's similar to that. And yeah, but like our fullest goal, I think, would be to pass on the ownership to whoever is in that position. Like we also have to respond to like pretty harsh realities, right? Of a couple of the tenants, right? Like where you're people in like 30% AMI, because that's the other thing. We were able to do 30% AMI to like 70% AMI, which is great. But people in the lower end obviously have like a ton of emergencies, like something goes wrong, their car breaks down, and it sort of sends everything in a shuffle. So the other piece of like breaking the traditional landlord tenant model is that in the cases where there's been like heavy need, we have been able to make like concessions of rent from like 6 to 8 months, right? Without them having to resort to getting loans or things like that. So that's also been part of the HomeKeep model, that because we have
That's amazing.
the three buildings, we don't shy away from just basically sharing resources across the three buildings, right? Like if one building is not able to cover their rent for several months because of all the hardships that they're experiencing, we know that the other ones might be able to cover it. But again, we do have that cushion because of the loan that the city provided. So and we continue to sort of like iterate and see what's going to happen with what's the best way to kind of not act as like as a nice landlords, right? We've had HomeKeep now for 2 years, so it's been also a lesson for us to it's you just can't move as fast and as we do in other projects, right?
Yeah.
So we just take the lessons, implement them, see what else happens. But it's like remembering like people live there, they have lives, and we kind of like move at the speed of trust, as we like to say, and we love that
That.
phrase. Yeah.
Move at the speed of trust. And I also really appreciate you sharing the kind of details behind the finance and economics that were needed to make the project work, and also the lived realities of how some things shake out a little bit differently than how we originally envisioned, but that's part of, the journey of entrepreneurship, that we are open to learning and adapting as those things, as we uncover new information or new needs. So
And I think,
oh, go ahead, Rafa.
no, I would just say, like, in terms of entrepreneurship, it's interesting because like, a lot of our role ends up being stewarding kind of like these projects. So if, in the case of HomeKeep, we're sort of stewarding the acquisition of the buildings and then figuring out how to not maximize everything, the profit, but also how do we also not get quote unquote stuck with these buildings for 30 years, right? Like, how can we just share the ownership with the people that live there, the people that want to own them? And so a lot of these questions sort of like come in mind, but I think one of the things that we have been able to do as a team is like just be able to look at the context to our, little framework and really think about like what can we do here, what do we want to do here, what do we not want to do, or what should somebody else be doing, or how do we pass the ball. And I think HomeKeep is a great example because we've also been able to like work hand in hand with some of the renters on finding jobs or finding rental assistance, which is unfortunately not a traditional responsibility of a landlord, but it's not something that has been so burdensome that we need a caseworker to be able to do it. Like at the end of the day, the scale of the project is manageable for us. So we like to think of setting precedents and how we act to, or like the things that we do as a business.
So I also love to talk a little bit about Starling Community Hub because one of the things that really inspired me about that process is that you guys really designed it from the ground up with residents in the area. So can one of you talk about kind of what that participatory process looked like and also how the building is different from a traditional community center or cafe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we paused because we each have their own spice, but I think Rafa, you want to start, and then Carla can talk about how it's going now after it's built, but I can sprinkle in stuff. Yeah. About.
Yeah, I mean, Starling is cool. We call it our album drop because it was sort of like the first building that we built from the ground up. And, it's like as part of Duo, I worked for a developer, so I sort of did that in a way before. But the whole thing started in around 2017. North Lawndale was working on a quality of life plan, which is for the listeners like an area plan, like a regional plan for the neighborhood of like what should go where, and that entailed a big participatory process, like public meetings and events. It was all a pretty good process. Residents in North Lawndale identified 16th Street, which is where the building is, as sort of like the street where the street that they wanted to see revitalized and come back to life. Because 16th Street now, you see a lot of empty lots, and same with North Lawndale. But before, it used to be a thriving commercial corridor, like your favorite thriving commercial corridor in Chicago. Very charming. There's cafes and bakeries and laundromats and things that you can walk to and do that support your sort of like day-to-day life and experience. And so they wanted to revitalize that. We were brought in to come up with sort of like a vision for 16th Street. And the way that we started engaging residents at the time was walking up and down 16th Street, going into businesses. And we realized there was this big disconnect between the planning organizations and people on 16th Street, sort of like on the ground, largely described as people who may not have been able to go to the meetings or weren't even aware that they were happening. But they live on 16th Street and they have obviously, like all of us, ideas of what it should be and where you want to live. So we our recommendation was that we didn't sort of come up with a shiny image for 16th Street, and instead we worked directly with residents to really think about at the very kind of zoomed in level for 16th Street, not just the neighborhood, kind of like what it should be and how people wanted to participate. We noticed that a lot of people were really interested in themselves owning or developing buildings. But today, there's not a very good way to become a developer outside of getting a master's degree or getting lucky with a family relationship or getting lucky with a mentor, which was my case. That's how I got into real estate development, and that's how I learned is because I got lucky with a really good mentor. And so instead of coming up with like an image of like this is the future vision of 60th Street, we came up with a curriculum for what we called at the time the D1 classes, which was teaching residents how to develop their first building, small scale, neighborhood scale. And we gave those classes for free in the neighborhood. So all of that kind of like public engagement on 16th Street then was also like fueled or reinforced by all of the engagement through these classes. We ended up giving, I think, 3 cohorts at the time in North Lawndale specifically, and then we partnered with Elevated Chicago to give the classes more broadly to the city. And we gave those classes very recently as part of this Obras Compartidas project that Karla described, but we knew like all of those, and then COVID happened and we sort of paused. But because of all that work, we knew that 16th Street was important. We were familiar with the history of the neighborhood, and we were familiar with the priorities that the neighbors, firsthand, sort of like what they wanted and what they said. The one other nugget of information that was really helpful is that there was a big disconnect generationally in the neighborhood between people who sort of wanted what every other neighborhood has in quotes, right? Like why can't we have a Subway? Why can't we have a Chipotle? Why can't we have a Starbucks? And a lot of the younger kind of like generation of people in the neighborhood were kind of like, why can't I become a chef here? Why can't I open my own restaurant here? Why can't I become a developer here? Why can't I? And so there was this like notion of being like, how can I be who I want to be in my own neighborhood instead of having to leave or trying to get out or trying to. And so I think like physical spaces are the foundation of that, right? Like you can't be a chef without a restaurant, right? So eventually knew what we wanted to start a project. We saw this like particular lot for sale on 16th Street, and Carlos and I sort of made an offer. It ended up being like many lots in the neighborhood had like tons of unpaid taxes, and it had some environmental concerns, but they weren't so bad in the end. But we didn't know exactly what the building was going to be, and so we knew generally that it was something for the public. We knew generally that it was something with this notion of like, how can I be what I want to be? And so those were kind of clues from neighbors themselves that led us to say, okay, well, maybe the concept here is a space for liberation. And we sort of like looked into how people have defined liberation from like philosophers or thinkers, your James Baldwin's, Angela Davis, the Zapatista movements, that type of thing. And so that's how we started kind of conceptualizing the concept. And I'll pass it to Carlos to kind of describe the concept. But the building itself, the process was very, I don't know, I guess like a lot of people in development call it risky, right? Like, why would you buy a lot if you don't know what the building's going to be yet? But we really wanted to show, again, like set a precedent for how you can steward the creation of this building, being very participatory, and not necessarily asking people like, what color do you think the building should be? And if 5 people say red and 4 people say blue, it's going to be red. It's really more about like really understanding the context, really being in the place and being a part of the community, because from exposure, like personal exposure. And so that's how we started kind of like molding it.
Yeah. And I think the piece of why we wanted to build something is almost to like put our money where our mouth was, right? Like we had been teaching the lessons, we're telling people like, listen, like anybody with some training, right? Like a little bit like can do this. And fortunately, like a few people from that took our classes had also been doing renovations or building buildings themselves. But yeah, the piece that really stuck with us, right, as we were like more involved since 2017, 2018 and in North Lawndale, was that when we talked to like residents on the ground, like people like had, things like, well, I just want a place to like, go like hang out, take my kids, like, there's literally nothing like that within a 20-minute walking radius in North Lawndale, right? When the disconnect was when we would talk to like institutions, they're like, oh, but it's North Lawndale. Is it gonna be a drug clinic? Is it gonna be a workforce development program? And it's like, no.
Really limiting
Yeah.
about what the community
Right.
deserves.
So that was an interesting one, right? So then that's why the concept of liberation like ended up being kind of validated, right? Those like the things that we were hearing. And then as we reviewed things, it's like, okay, from all the authors Rafa mentioned, right, we saw that to achieve liberation, you have need spaces where you can gather, replenish, learn, and create, right? And we were also thinking, okay, well, it's gonna be our first project, small size. We also want to make sure that we see that the people that we've been engaging with, like, see that there's a direct result from the engagement. So we don't want it to be a massive project, right? That's gonna take us years to fundraise for and then build. So that was all part of the puzzle that we were solving and making sure, right, that we saw that we were serving a need in the neighborhood. And like again, like more on the institutional side, right? It's like some people even said like another cafe in North Lawndale, and I'm like, there are two others, good sir, right? There's like, and they're literally 20-minute walk from each other, right? Like you see like 3 to 4 coffee shops in a single block in like Wicker Park.
Right.
So things like that were like interesting, and like it's been like really fun for us to see that because we are able to kind of like navigate all of those worlds, right? Like the institutional world and then the people on the ground. And I think that's also related to our like experiences as duo, because like we were all in like professionalized settings, right? Like very like highbrow, like Deloitte, University of Michigan, Studio Gang, the US Senate. And then you see how these people like problem solve, right? From the clouds. But then like we also like grew up as like undocumented immigrants. So we're just like, what the hell is going on? Right like up there. So that's the sort of like I think big piece of the magic that we like to bring forth. That we are able to hold everybody's like opinions as what they are, right? Like just because somebody is like local on the ground doesn't mean they're right either. Just because somebody has money, it means they're right. Like a couple of people were just like, "Oh, you should just make that a police station." We were like, "Absolutely not! Like that is not a good idea."
Yeah.
Right? So
Like, have you met us?
yeah. So
Well,
things like that, but some people were like from institutions, like they're at a meeting and they're like, "Oh, that one person said they want a police station. Let's build a police." It's like,
that
no,
whole report.
like keep talking to people, like connect the dots.
Well, and I
So
think that feeds really well into this. Like for our practice, one of the things that we're really just interested in is like who decides what this places should be, you know? Because like if you're an architect, like sure you can design what it looks like or how it works, but for architects, somebody's always telling them what it should be. Like they give them a brief, like I need a cafe and I need a cafe of this size and with this many tables. But our curiosity was always like, well, how do you know that? Like, what's the best case scenario here for this particular building? And also, who decides what new types of uses are? Like, what's that job? Like, I always was interested in wanting that job. So, like, the example we give often, in part because Starling has a cafe in it, is like when you think of a coffee shop, you think of the typical coffee shop Starbucks model where like you go up to a counter, you order a coffee. You generally know the rules of the road. Like you probably can pop open your laptop and work in there and and so like we started thinking about okay, like Starbucks made that up, but they don't have to work that way. Coffee shops used to work very differently. The London Stock Exchange started as a cafe where they would trade stocks. And so like if you look at different cultures, different countries, you start to see that really we can kind of make anything that we want as long as it works. And so the only way for it to work is to really make something oriented to the people who are already there that actually responds to a need and it's sort of like brought to life in a way that they would want to use. And so I think that's part of the importance of community engagement and public engagement. It's not like because it feels good or because it's like gonna look nicer, but it actually like we see our jobs as like helping to steward this process to bring these places to life because we just have a particular set of skills to be able to do that, but it doesn't mean that it should just be our command, for like what this building should be. And so this one was important for us because we were able to really blank slate say like, okay, what is a space for liberation where people could gather, replenish, learn, and create? And so, like, one of the things we would say in conversation is like, well, that sounds like an amenity. Like, there should be something to do in the building all the time. And, a cafe is a pretty nice conduit to that because you can gather and you can replenish, right? But then we also started thinking about like, what about the rest of the space? We don't want it to just be like people sitting on their laptops. So then, like, this is where like the business kind of starts mixing in. So it's like, what if anybody could use the building for whatever they wanted? So like you go in there and the experience design, right? Like you walk in to get a coffee and then like all of a sudden there's a yoga class or you go to get a coffee on a Friday and there's a lecture or there's a movie night and so you make this amenity, not just your pit stop before and after work, but really like a place where again like you can be like it exposes you to things that you can be or that you might be interested in or have a hobby or meet a friend or fall in love, like things that buildings are actually for.
and that was also a resident need. Like the people were asking for places for like the baby shower, the prom send off, things like that. They were like, we have none of that, and so we were trying to like kind of make all of that possible, right, within the square footage that we had, and yeah, but really like ended up being it's like a place that we say like there's elements of shared ownership there, but like we can get into it 'cause they're a little different, but also like the ownership of like when do you feel like a building is yours, right? Like just because you're on the LLC on it and you're an investor, or just like you get to use it, right? And it feels like it's yours. So I think that's put in front of a lot of the programming. And Karla can probably talk a little bit more about just how it's been used, like the reception over the past like year. It's been like really cool to see.
Yeah, so the way it's been used has been extremely exciting. We started the first year piloting a membership where we partnered with other organizations, or some of them were small business owners, where they would get 36 hours of use for $300 a month. And that was a way in which they would have ongoing programming. So that was a kind of a pilot that we had during the first year. And then on top of that, people are also able to rent the space by the hour. And we wanted it to be, we ended up making it rentable for each specific space that you're using, rather than having to rent the full building if you're not going to be using it because you just want a small room for a meeting, or one section to have like a, what are this called? A book club. Then you shouldn't really have to pay for the full building, right? So also we had people that have been interested in having pop-ups and launching their business without having to take on the full risk of a storefront or a full-on residency. So that's what the different use cases have honestly come up and unfolded, even beyond what we have had even thought of, beyond our intended design. We had somebody who proposed to their partner at Starling, so they rented the space at night. And because there's also Monday Coffee, who's the anchor tenant there, they're also amazing. They have incredible coffee, they roast on site, and they also do some programming themselves. It's kind of become known that sometimes there's going to be events at Starling or at Monday Coffee that you can go to. So this person told their partner that there was a music set at Starling, and the person didn't blink twice. They're like, all right, there's probably something going on. But the surprise was that they walked in, there was a cello player, and the person proposed to their partner. And so those moments have been the sweetest for sure, where it's kind of gone beyond the ideas that we had, and people have truly made it their own for their life milestones. And now we recently launched a new, like a revised version of the memberships. Rather than just having one set membership, we are now offering a programming pass, which has 3 different tiers offering 10 hours, 20 hours, and 40 hours, depending on the type of programming that people want to have. But it's meant for those folks who want to have kind of like a home base without, again, fully having to commit to a certain place. And that's what we're working on right now. But the ongoing hourly rentals are going to continue. And some other fun examples that we have seen, we had some book launches, baby showers, a prom send-off, like Carlos mentioned, the proposal. We've had music pop-ups, DJ sets, jazz sets, like the list
Pizza.
has been. What'd you say?
The pizza guy.
Oh yeah, somebody brought a pizza. We also sometimes see videos of what's going on,
Yeah, pizza.
Yeah, they were like throwing the dough. So that's also, it's been fun. And we've also had people, I recently talked to somebody who wants a programming pass, and she said, I actually grew up in North Lawndale, but now I live in Oak Park, and I would love the programming pass. And it's exciting to be able to go back to the community that I grew up in and be able to provide my services to members in my community. So that's also been really great to see that it's been used by people in the neighborhood, in other neighborhoods. People from out of state have come by and visited. We actually had one famous person, young Miko, who is a reggaeton artist. She posted a picture on Instagram. We didn't even know she was there.
She didn't tag us. She didn't
She
tag us.
didn't tag us. She was just having some coffee, but it's a good place for pictures. So
It is a gorgeous building.
thank you.
Well, that was a huge part of it too, because
Yeah.
I think again, like we're really proud of Starling. We think that we succeeded in part because we don't know exactly what to call it, which was the whole premise, right? Like, how do you come up with a new type of place? Because it is a cafe, and also it's all these other things because they happen in the building. So our nerdy side is kind of like secretly rejoices when people are like, is that a cafe or is that something else? We're like, it's a little bit of both, Same with Duo. We're a little bit of a lot of things. But I think the big thing too was that because this was like in part grant funded and all these things, like people imagine that, oh, it's a community center, or it's like a building that has grants, so it's probably gonna be not as nice as a regular building, probably gonna be a little ugly, but that's okay because it's, for the people, and like we just want to make it happen. And we like absolutely despise that line of thinking. Like,
Yes.
we wanted to make something that was good in general. The racist classist comment that we got a lot was like, "Oh, that's really nice. Like, why aren't you building that in Fulton Market? Why are you building it in Lawndale?" Happened a lot,
Our
but
communities deserve beautiful things.
Yes.
exactly. And so we really like deeply, it like fueled our fire. A lot of parts of this process was like very angering, but it fueled the fire to say like, you know what? Get your ass to North Lawndale. Like, I don't know what to
Right.
tell you. And so, we gave it a lot of care in terms of the design too, like the aesthetics and the feeling of it, and the access to nature. There's a garden that's well maintained and like all of these things. And so now what we really like is that, you know, people in the neighborhood are able to point at it and say like the next building, like, oh, can it be kind of like that? Can it be
Yeah.
nice like that one, or can it feel similar? Not in the look of it, but just in the quality of it, and
Right.
in how it feels to be like a good kind of, again, like neighborhood place, not just closed off.
Thank you guys so much for sharing kind of the behind the scenes that went into bringing Starling to life, and also all of the exciting things that have happened like since you launched. I absolutely love that we're, bringing places of beauty and liberation to our communities. And yeah, I would have been absolutely heated if someone said something about, why are you putting that in North Lawndale in the Fulton Market? Don't doubt it for a second. Can only imagine how many times people have said ridiculous things. So
Ridiculous.
go ahead.
Yes. No, I'm just saying, yes, people, very ridiculous thing. They're audacious.
Yeah, yeah. The audacity is what gets me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and then they'll just say it to you, and like I can't keep a straight face because, like, what do you mean? Do you hear yourself?
Right.
And they do, and don't hear a problem with it, which is the problem.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's why it's like the new realities, right? We like to show them too, show the haters too, the new realities that are possible in a beautiful
Yes.
world. Yeah.
Yeah, that you can build amazing things, buildings with intention, that are, designed well, and that they can be successful in communities.
Exactly.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about your business model because you guys have talked about some of these amazing projects that you're doing. And I know that a lot of the listeners, they're always, there's this underlying fear that, they don't want to compromise their values, but they need to make money, and they're trying to figure out what it means to be ethically profitable in this environment, because we know that you do have to have profit to sustain your business, to be able to invest in your business, to be able to power your purpose. So how have you guys gone about designing the kind of financial operations of the business to support the impact that you're building?
Yeah, I can take the lead. This one gets me really excited. But yeah, I think I want to say just like misconception, right? Like I think that if you're doing something that's valuable and good to the world, that probably means you're making the money in the wrong way, right? And I feel like that's just like a really problematic sign of the times, right? That if you like that now, right? Like, yeah, sure, money gets made at any cost possible. So one thing that we always like remind our students too, because there's that feeling it's like, oh, if I'm making money, am I a bad person, right? And we're like, no. And then we always say like, money and markets are older than capitalism, right? Like how we use the money, like we're mad at the way we use the money, not at money itself. Like it's just a tool.
Yes.
So we're very mindful of that, right? Like, and we say, like, if you think you're doing something in the world, like, or selling something that is not providing a benefit, like, why are you doing that, right? Like, I don't care, like, what it
Questions
is,
that need to be asked.
like, don't do it, right? Like, if that's really the question, sure, like, stop. But if you're building a building, providing housing, building something that's actually beneficial to people, you should feel proud to be able to do that, right? Like you're a contributing member of society. So the way we did the business model, right, is we on one side do client service work, right? Like that's like design or anything like in house and our wheelhouse that we can do. We provide like for a fee for like kind of projects that are mission aligned, and we don't really have a restriction on whether those mission aligned clients are for profit or nonprofit, right? Like another sort of thing that we try to debunk is that the legal structure does not prescribe the morality of your operations, right? Like
Yes.
just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you're all of a sudden exempt of evil. And just because you're a for-profit
That's
doesn't mean, yeah, the opposite. So we definitely like try to find clients that want to do built environment innovations for the benefit of society. That's kind of like the guiding criteria for us. That's what we do at Duo. And then we reinvest those fees into our own projects. So projects that we do again, like for our own realities, because things like Starling, HomeKeep, because the client service work, we kind of grew up professionally in that space, and it's good and all, but there's only so much a client can do. And sometimes we're like, man, but that last recommendation I gave you guys, if you did it, like that would be really cool. But they're like, no, that's not gonna apply. So then we sometimes take pieces of those things as inspiration for our own work. But ultimately, like definitely that's sort of what fuels the machine. Being a nonprofit also opens us up for being able to receive grants. So there's a good diverse sources of income from different sources. And then as far as like growth too, like we have been like very careful, and we like always sort of like reassessing like what are we trying to do, because it's very easy, right? Like another kind of thing we've been like socialized as business owners is like you find your thing and then you just repeat your thing until you can retire and then sell your business to somebody else or something like that, right? But we do is like, okay, sure, we have this like design and consultancy arm. Traditional thinking would tell you just grow that forever, right? Because consulting margins are very healthy. Like just keep hiring people, make yourself a little, hopefully national conglomerate, and you're gonna be successful. Or like start doing Starling and they copy paste them and put a Starling in every disinvested neighborhood, or like keep doing your become a developer, just do a deal every year, things like that, right? So like more of the same. So we definitely try to think of the question of like what's enough money for us, for ourselves as a family to live the life that we want to live. And whenever we reflect on the enough, if we choose the path of like growth for the sake of growth, you end up with like way more than enough. And then you don't really like you're trading off like pretty important things like your quality of life, time with your family, like, you know, ability to put a lot of time and dedication to the projects that we're focusing in, right? Like what Rafa said, that we would not like to be like the director type of like, what's the status of each of the projects? And you just kind of do a lap around the office. It's like, no, like we like to be involved, like we're able to do that. And so far it's like been working well. So there's no reason to just like adhere to some standard, right, of like what growth is. And that ended up like being a really good discussion with the obras compartidas that Karla mentioned earlier, right? Because we were like, okay, like we finished Starling, and it was like cool to get the questions like, okay, what's next? But like we got that question like literally the month that Starling was finished. We were tired as hell, and the city had just like announced the missing middle, and we just like read we were like, no, like, we're not doing this, none of this missing middle. Uh, so, but it kept coming up. Okay, are we gonna build another building? Right? Like, it wasn't just like, well, we built one building and we like for sure have to keep building them, right? It was just like this one fit the context at the time. So what's next? So then the obras compartidas kind of surfaced as a good way to, not just what's next for us, but also like who's next. Like we really do want to see that reality of like everyday people should be able to design and build buildings. So then like how do we do that? How do we make that happen? And that also happens to be a very, sustaining economically for us, because then each we're able to fundraise for the pre-development. Then each project will also be able to charge fees for the construction of it, right? Like acting as general contractors. And then we're also going to be minority stake owners in the building. So they also become like investment vehicles for us for the future. So it's, it's busy right now, but it's like, it's gonna sort of like level off, but it's also helping us to shape, really cool spaces with all of these like different like 17 people. But it's always like the business model and like what we do next and what we do with our time is just like I think of the utmost like importance, right? And rather than just like get an autopilot and at risk of leaving a lot of the more like fulfilling parts of the work at the off of that.
I mean, it's also worth mentioning because I think our practice is non-traditional, so it's easy to think like, oh, well, maybe they have a ton of funding, and it's like must be nice, but I think, we've definitely like these conversations that Carlos is talking about are not always like so easy. Like we don't scream at each other, right? Like we're civil, but I mean, there's disagreements of like, oh, if we do, like for example, for me, it's like now we can do general contracting. So why don't we just do more of that? But then, Carlos and Carla are like, well, if we do that, then like you're gonna go into this black hole because you have to be there, and then you're not gonna be able to do this other thing. So like, is that a priority? And and sort of like put things in perspective to have a lot of conversations. And we've also had like many kind of boutique size businesses. Like we've had some months where we pause our payroll and then we continue it the next month, or we, like some months are slower than others, and we have to really think about, okay, do we try to prioritize a consulting client versus one of our own projects this month or next month, or what does that look like?
Yeah.
And of course, like we've been building towards not having to do those things, but Duo is only 5 years old. And so there's definitely those growing
Mhm.
pains, but running a business is hard anyways. And so I think part of what I think is interesting is that it's easier to default to something that you think you already know, like way of operating, just because it's somehow been done before. And inevitably you'll have like thought leaders out there and playbooks and things like that. But at the end of the day, you always have to kind of make it your own with the skills that you have and with the access to things that you have. So you might as well make it something you like. Otherwise, you know, it's a prison that you're building for yourself. I mean, truly.
I won't ask you what's next for Duo because you guys have talked about getting that question a lot. And unless you would like to share more about the new announcement, we can definitely take time to do that.
Yeah, no, and we like the question. It's just one of those things like, oh, we don't have the answer yet.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you just have a baby and then
Yeah.
people are like, "Are you having another one?" Like, I haven't recovered from the first one.
Uh,
Like, I'm just tired. That's all I know right now.
It's
mhm.
exactly that.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. We're like, we're gonna be just aunts and uncles for a bit,
Right.
and just support other people bringing up their own new buildings. Yeah.
Because that is
Yeah.
like a such an undertaking, which I don't think people who like have not actually gone through the process of buying a lot and then going through a participatory development process, developing a space and then shepherding it for, entire year. It's very hard for people to wrap their head around it when they have not actually like witnessed what goes on behind the scenes to make that happen.
Yeah, so that's basically our current focus. So we have a few clients from, the design side, but the main like our own sort of like initiative is going to be the making sure that obras compartidas partnerships are all they need to become like shovel ready by within this year essentially. So the goal for them is going to have like a basically like a fundable building idea and a concept by the end of 12 months. And some people are farther along than others. So some we're looking at on groundbreakings in the spring, which is really exciting.
Exciting.
So it's like really cool to see that, with just a little bit of guidance, like people are able to, see their realities come to life.
Yeah.
And then it's like the funding, right? Like the funding is the one thing that always gets in the way. The way we underwrite buildings. I'm gonna throw this jab because I like it. But it's like people are always like, oh, the housing crisis, it's so hard to build buildings. And it's like so you're popping up with things like modular construction. You're gonna build a house like so quickly. It's like, yeah, well, it doesn't matter that the house can be built very quickly. It's gonna take you like 2 years to underwrite it, right? Like
Yeah.
and like release the funds to build the thing. So I think that's something that we're seeing, right? Like even when we built Starling, we got a large grant from We Rise Together that was like given to us like ahead of time. Like, we had fulfilled minimum requirements, obviously, but that allowed us to start construction, right? Like there was no mystery. Like we build buildings. We're not doing experimental technology here. Like we know how to build buildings as human beings. And then we received others from the city that were reimbursement based, right? And those were like so painful. Those were like the reasons the building wasn't built even sooner.
Yeah.
Same thing with the loan and finding the lender that would underwrite something that wasn't neatly fitting in a box, right? So fortunately, like Starling worked, and now we are able to partner in that way as almost like the experience part of the partnership with all of these
Yeah.
12 teams. But yeah, I think that's like you said, are gonna keep us more than busy for the time being. But it's really awesome because then we can kind of have a 12 proofs of concepts of like, listen,
Yes.
all these people technically not qualified to be developers. As soon as we were able to find the money, we were able to build a building. Like, this is not like a one-off thing or magic. It's like something that we can do. So yeah, we're very excited for what's next.
Yes, we're gonna have to, yeah, invite you guys back next year to bring one or two of those partners and talk
Oh
about
yeah.
the deals as they are happening. So
I
my
mean,
next Yes, because I think that there is that's part of why I started this podcast, because there's so much power in people knowing what is possible. And I think that the three of you are visionaries. And Rafa, you kind of talked about how, we define what reality is. And some people can just envision things like that. And other people need to see it happen before they can aim for it. And so I think that the work that you guys are doing is so powerful because it's going to catalyze both with your direct intervention, but also just people listening and learning more about your story and saying, hey, this works. This different model works. I can also, do that. So
Yeah.
my question for you guys is, if someone is listening to this and they are a founder or an architect or a developer or urban planner and they're inspired by what you are doing, what's the one mindset shift or first step you'd recommend for them to start building something differently?
I think honestly, I've really learned this more like actually working now with Duo with my brothers is every day I feel like I continue to just kind of like break outside of my original mental models or like specific patterns of thinking, because I grew up and I feel like we were shaped in our values because of the way that we grew up, like the lived experiences and injustices that we experienced being undocumented immigrants. But even then, like some things that I used to believe I've realized aren't true, and I feel like I'm constantly learning, just like there really are new ways of operating and everything is designable. Like everything that we do see was by design, and everything that we can continue to do is also by design, and we have the ability to do it ourselves and to partner with other people to do it. That's why Duo is called Duo. It's, of course, Carlos and Rafa founded it, and it was two of them. Now that there's three of us, everyone's like, "Are you going to change it to trio?" And we continue to say no, because the premise of Duo is that we say siempre al menos dos, always at least two, because it always takes that partnership with somebody else to be able to propel something forward in the realities that we want to create.
And I would add to that, like, I mean, definitely doubling down on the everything is designable, right? Like your businesses that you want to do, like the way you want to work as a business owner, like that's all designable. I think it's like a work and, constant practice, right? Like, because there are a lot of like menu options, right? Of anything that you want to do, right? Like if you want to start a business, how you structure it, right? Like there's predetermined options, or like, for example, like if you're going to be a startup, like you need to have venture capital funding, but like that's not necessarily true, right? And like some people just see that, like they'll look at the thing that's most visible, and they assume that that's the only way possible.
Yeah.
So for us, like that was similar, right? Like we're like, oh, should we be looking for investors if we're gonna be growing the business? Then we actually like just put numbers down. We're like, oh no, actually, like if we look for investors, we'd be actually selling off a large chunk of things that we could do, right? If we just sort of like tightened the belt a little bit. So I think always looking at like yourselves and what you want to do, what brings you happiness, meaning, and like put it in that context, right? And like the things that you need to make as far as money, and then seeing if like what you're seeing out there is the path that you need to follow, or if there are actually options that fit better that you just aren't seeing that you can actually create for yourself. I think that is another piece.
Yeah, and I would say like the definition of success is an interesting one. Like, I mean, we're interested again in like this being, like who am I, or like what is this thing, or. But I think a question that we always say is like, why not us, right? Like, if people do it out there, clearly they figured out how to do it. We're not copying some like cosmic force here. Like it's another human, and so I think that's an interesting one, is like you definitely can learn, but the hard work in it is sort of reflecting of like what do you actually want to do and why. Like a lot of founders don't explicitly say that what they really want is to sell a company for hundreds of millions of dollars, regardless of what the company is, you know? And so like a lot of founders go after that dream and burn themselves in the process, or burn the planet in the process, or burn other people in the process. And so I think really kind of like being honest with what you're after, what that means for your life, what that means for your skills. Because if there's something that you don't know how to do, you can go learn how to do that and kind of, it sounds cheesy, but like make it come true. I mean, like it's I think just the way that we are taught in schools and the way that we work in the professional environment, like we sort of pick a lane, we pick a career, we pick a path. And it's even the notion that somebody would have a hard time pivoting. Like we even have those terms, right? Like I'm pivoting my career. It's like, who cares? You're a person. Like you can cook and you can clean and you can garden and you can build a building and you can make a movie. Like, and so I think that's something that we always try to break. It's like sometimes to a discomfort. Obviously, there's people who have spent a lot of times doing these things and they're really good at it, but it really is like, you know, what happens if you pick up the camera, or what happens if you, you know, s- put hard boots and a hard hat on and like manage construction, or like you kind of have to start doing it and learn along the way. So I think there's a lot of kind of start walking mentality and just be honest with yourself.
Yeah, I think that is such a poignant way to wrap up this conversation. So, Carlos, Rafael, and Karla are proving that you can acquire real buildings, generate real revenue, and create real community ownership, all while refusing to compromise on your values. So, if you're a purpose driven founder wondering whether it's possible to build something profitable and transformative, Duo Development is your proof of concept. To learn more about their work or explore multi-contextual design, or find out more about the Starling Community Hub, you can visit duodevelopment.org, and we'll have that in the show notes. And if this conversation sparks something for you, I hope that you share it with another founder, architect, or change maker who needs to hear that purpose and profit don't have to be enemies. If this conversation resonated with you, we'd love for you to subscribe to the Purpose Profit Shift wherever you listen to podcasts. We've got episodes dropping regularly with more visionary founders and change makers who are reshaping how business gets done. And if you found value in today's episode, please leave us a rating and review. It helps other values-driven leaders find us. Until next time, keep leading with intention, scaling responsibly, and building businesses that matter. I'm Rachel Bernier Green, and this is the Purpose Profit Shift.